Julie Ward, it's a pleasure to have you here for IOHR TV. Thank you for joining us today. Now, you are strongly socially committed and engaged in humanitarian causes. Can you tell us more about your involvement as an MEP in campaigning for human rights abuses in Turkey, and tell us why you do it?
When I was elected in 2014, I was asked to be on the Culture and Education Committee and the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee, and I co-founded a children's rights cross-party intergroup. So I was working on human rights in terms of women's rights, LGBT rights and children's rights. But then a constituent of mine who was Kurdish came to talk to me about what had been happening to his family who lived near Diyarbakir. So when I began to learn more about the targeted attacks on the Kurdish community, I became very interested in what was happening to them. And so I made a trip to Diyarbakir for a study visit. I started to learn more about the political landscape, and I then hosted conferences and meetings. I was very proud earlier this year to host the conference which gave the verdict of the Permanent People's Tribunal on Turkey and the Kurds, which is a very important mechanism for people who don't have recourse to justice in their own country. I also worked with the Committee for the Protection of Journalists and Human Rights Watch on a twinning project where I twinned with Zara Doğan and helped to raise up awareness of the fact that she's been imprisoned. She's an artist. She is the editor of a brilliant women's media collective, and she's in prison for supposed illegal activities, but particularly for painting a picture. I want to stand up for her because I worked in the arts. That's important for me. I want to stand up for her because she's a feminist, and I want to stand up for her because she's a proud Kurd.
You were detained in Turkey in 2016 while you were going to a human rights conference. Tell us, if you would, what happened that day, and tell us about the holding and detention of foreign nationals in that country.
Well, I was on my way to Diyarbakir, and when I went to the Turkish Airlines help desk to ask for some help, having already made the first leg of my journey to Istanbul. And when I told the clerk at the help desk where I was going, he became very agitated and started saying, "Oh, you're not a journalist, are you? You're not a human rights campaigner, are you? You're not going to cause trouble, are you?" I actually didn't say who I was. I said I was going to Diyarbakir because it's full of culture, it's full of cultural heritage. I work in culture, that's true. I'm on the Culture and Education Committee. In fact, I was staying overnight at an airport hotel, and when I arrived at the airport hotel, about half an hour later, the plainclothes Turkish police were there waiting for me, and they took various gadgets from me, like my phone, my iPad. I had a printed out agenda of the study visit we were going to be participating in, which clearly showed that we were going to be meeting the two co-mayors who are the HDP members, that we were going to be meeting trade unionists. We were also meeting the members of the ruling party, as it happens, the AKP. But they put me in a vehicle, took me back to the airport, took me into an interrogation room, and it was very frightening. It was very frightening because they wouldn't let me speak to anybody, they wouldn't let me call anybody, they wouldn't answer my questions. My biggest fear was actually what might happen to the people that I was going to meet. I was less concerned about myself because bottom line is I could have said, well, I'm an MEP, here's my diplomatic passport, you know, I want you to deliver me into the safe hands of the British consulate. And I think they would have just sent me home. But I did experience several hours of real threats. I mean, I felt an undercurrent of malevolence, of quite machismo kind of, toughness in a way, where I had my rights taken away from me. And it was simply because of my destination. Now, this demonstrates what a paranoid state the Turkish state has become.
As an MP and an MEP for North West England, would you say that the UK and the EU's policy approaches to Turkey's attack on civil society are working well in parallel? And what, if any, effect do you think that Brexit will have on this?
Brexit presents enormous challenges in every area of life. And so what the government are trying to do is to cosy up to people that they will be able to do trade deals with post-Brexit. And what I've seen Theresa May do and her government ministers do is basically go around trying to butter up various countries in order to, create the conditions for trade deals. But these states that they're visiting, these countries where they're trying to get the trade deals, are actually the most repressive countries in the world. So, Turkey is a good example. Saudi Arabia. I mean, what are we doing wanting to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, particularly with the terrible murder of Khashoggi recently? And so it really sickens me to see the Prime Minister of Great Britain shaking hands with President Erdogan. Well, I know people are in prison simply for going about their lawful work. If we think about the EU position is perhaps more nuanced. The refugee deal, as it was, has been very complex, very difficult. I don't think, whilst it may have given some relief to some refugees, also in a way let the Turkish state off the hook. But there's an issue about civil society, and we cannot pull the rug completely out from underneath the feet of civil society in Turkey, because the issue is not an issue we have with the people. It's with the government, and it's with an increasingly repressive authoritarian regime. And in those situations, what we have to do as the EU, and we should be doing it as the UK, what we have to do as democratic countries who care about freedom and democracy and rule of law, what we should be doing is trying to support and build capacity in civil society.
What effect do you think the International Observatory of Human Rights and other NGOs have in raising awareness about the issues in Turkey?
Well, you all make the lives of politicians difficult in a way, and that's a good thing. I welcome that. I think we need to be bothered, when we need to have people knocking on our doors and alerting us to the many human rights abuses that are happening. We are seeing attacks on human rights defenders. So there is an organisation called Frontline Defenders, and it's their role, their mission, to defend human rights defenders. Now, I don't think we ever thought we would be living in a world where human rights defenders are under attack. So we are in a very dangerous place right now in this world because terrorism is being used as an excuse. We've seen a lot of Interpol red cards being abused, actually, frankly. And the issue of security is often used as a reason to shut down public space, to limit civil society, to bring in emergency laws, which will limit freedom of speech, limit media, limit academics, limit even the work of lawyers and teachers, trade unionists. I've written letters to foreign ministers, to prime ministers, to embassies, ambassadors, to the press, to foreign ministers about a whole load of cases. And I have seen that my words make a difference. because I've spoken sometimes in the plenary, a human rights defender has been released.
Julie Ward, thank you for joining us.